Well, good morning, everybody. I don't know how long we can keep doing this for, but anyway, thank you again for the people who said that nice to hear me back. And others saying, I thought you weren't coming back. Well, I've just come back just to put your nose out of place, a bit like my own nose is out of place. I'm going to actually talk today. This is all based on the sort of Morris announcement. Because people have been saying, why do you think he's gone? And I said, I know who's going next. And I said, I believe it's Let, because clearly he's mentally ill. But the thing about it is, when you look at the things like Morris and Let and all the rest of them, when you look at the things they say, you do think they are the ramblings of a group of men who are mentally ill. They do come across as the ramblings of men who are mentally ill. And I would suggest all of them. I would suggest all of the governing body members are mentally unwell, mentally unstable. And I believe, by going to the Watchtower's own teachings, that they cannot even be of the 144,000 figure. It's impossible. And this is just by looking at something that the Watchtower has repeated up until very recently. So if you're unaware about what it actually says, it's interesting, because it actually means that none of this current crop can be of the 144,000. Especially the next generation of the 144,000, who are boldly going to take us where no overlapping generation has taken us before. But anyway, we'll take it then, because of course I'm out of it. So anyway, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Let's go back all the way back to Pentecost 33 CE, but let's call it 33 AD if that makes it any better. And apparently that's the first time ever that this heavenly hope was offered to people on the earth, because up until that time, of course, we're led to believe that the hope for everybody living up to this point was for a resurrection to a cleansed paradise earth, a teaching that was repeatedly within the scriptures that were under that time, so that nobody is under any doubt what awaited them when they died. If only that was true, hence the confusion we have today. So anyway, we'll come back to that one. Right, let's crack on. So, as we know, to announce yourself as a Christian back in the first century was a bad career move, if you liked something called living and breathing. Because if you came out the closet and say, hi, I'm a Christian, there was a good chance that, you could end up getting stoned to death by the Jewish faith, the Jewish people, because they viewed you as a heretic, believing in this false Messiah. And of course the Romans weren't too happy that you were going around saying that all their gods and temples were all false worship as well, and they were willing to do a bit of killing themselves. So for anybody to come out and say that they were a Christian at that time was a bad career move. Many of the apostles died. Apostle Paul apparently died in 65 AD. And then we crack on to 31 years after Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul, as we know, wrote an awful lot of the Christian Greek scriptures. We come to around about 96 AD, which is when it's believed that the book of Revelation was actually written by, the Apostle John. And in the book of Revelation, a book that is full of symbolism, that we find this phrase of the 144,000. It's the only part in the Bible that we get this phrase, and yet bizarrely, the witnesses say, of course, that in a really odd book, which is like somebody who was on magic mushrooms at the time, wrote down this dream, full of dreaming, everything was mythical and full of all these strange beasts and what have you, and bizarre things happening, that this one figure, 144,000, is actually a figurative figure set in stone. Bizarre. Everything else in the book is not figurative, but of course this one thing is figurative. So we're stuck with 144,000, and this is where the current governing body become completely unstuck. So John dies in 99 AD, apparently 3 years after writing the book of Revelation. So how many Christians were there only 50 years later? Some of these people in AD 150 now still saying I'm a Christian would have overlapped, were the overlapping generation. After John, some of them may have even known John. I don't know how widely his book was distributed at that time. They're probably thinking, oh my, what the, guy's off his tits. But anyway, we're talking about only 50 years after John dies, the author of the Revelation, where you get the 144,000 teaching. How many Christians do you think there were? It's been estimated that there was get this figure right, 40,000 Christians. And the heavenly calling apparently is only for 144,000. So straight away we're down. We're down to 100,000. Now at that time, as I said before, to come out at being Christian was not a good call. Now the hope for these people, for this newfangled religion, based on this man coming back from the dead and then giving this hope, this heavenly hope that everybody who believed him would be saved. This hope was that strong with these people that they were willing to die for the reward for the heavenly reward. Because of course the fault in our DNA in humans is that we want more, please. That we don't just accept, like the animals, that this is our life, we live, we die, and hopefully we pass on some semblance of our life to people who like us, or through our children, or through our teachings or whatever. But no, we want more, and we want a lot more. We don't just want another 70 years, 80 years, we want forever. And we want to be in the company of all those people that have gone before us, because we just can't accept that our own demise. So for these Christians here, their belief was, yeah, I don't accept, that's it. I want to believe something else, and this new teaching by these Christians seems to be the way to go. And these ones, because of believing that they wanted a heavenly reward, would be seeing it a lot earlier than they thought, because a lot of them were put to death early doors. In fact, it's been estimated between 64 AD and 313 AD that the Romans alone, and this doesn't come into what the Jews did or other groups around, they killed an estimated 3,500 Christians who probably died in some absolutely awful manners of death for entertainment. If you think about these ones here having to be so brave to believe in this heavenly hope and this heavenly calling, and compared to the current crop over that century, what these guys had to go through is nothing. So when it comes to the merits of deciding who is worthy of a heavenly hope, it's clearly got to be the first couple of century Christians who really put their lives on the line here to go out and spread this word, knowing that if they went out and spoke to your neighbour about believing this guy called Jesus Christ, that it might end up you getting dobbed in and then torn apart. So, only 50 years after John dies, there's 40,000. If we fast forward only 50 more years again to AD 200, the amount of estimated Christians there were at that time was 218,000. And again, this is 113 years before the Romans, 123 years before the Romans finally made Christianity the number one religion in the Roman Empire. So at the moment, the persecution's going on from 64 to 313, well, before 64 to 313. We're talking about 113 years before the persecution sort of came to an end. So even in AD 200 to come out as a Christian is still probably a bad career move, because they were still persecuting this time. 218,000 Christians. So which would mean that the 144,000 has been reached and has been filled, and it's, oh my God, what we're going to do with the rest of them. And this is the problem I have with not just the current governing body members, but anybody saying that they are a member of the 144,000 in the last couple of centuries, because that figure clearly was filled, what, 1600 years ago or more. That was filled 1800 years ago. It was filled a long time ago, nearly 2,000 years ago. I believe that figure was filled. Now, interestingly, let's crack on through the centuries to 1914. In 1914, there were around about 50,000 Bible students who all believed in this heavenly hope, despite the fact that the paradise hope was staring them in the face, because it's repeated so many times in the Bible that they were different to everybody else and they believed in this heavenly hope. Because as we know, the paradise hope is not repeated continually in the Bible, and you struggle to find it. So anyway, the first president of the Watchtower in 1915, I think he died a few years later, said that he believed that the full figure, the figure of the 144,000 in his mind, was completed in 1881. Yes, so it gets even more complicated. The second president of the society, which is Judge Rutherford, he believed that it was actually completed in 1931. Okay, 1931 was what? 90 years ago. 1931 was 19 years ago. So this makes sense in my upbringing as a witness, because in the 1984s, when I first saw my first elderly witnesses, consuming the the crackers and the wine, they were in their 80s or late 70s, and they didn't, I think they were dead within another 5 years after that. I think by 1990 they were all brown bread. But when I saw them in 1984, they were in their 80s or late 70s, which would make sense, because we're talking about 1984, and if they were in the witnesses prior to 1930, maybe 1920, if they'd been at all this time, that was the only hope. This staring you in the face earthly hope, and that was apparently written all the way, the DNA was all the way through the Bible repeatedly, which it isn't, that they sort of bucked the trend a wee bit and said, oh no, I'm for the heavenly calling here, which is why at that time, in the 1984s, all the governing body members, as far as I'm aware, were all, ones who in the 1930s had been in the organisation prior to 1930s, which made sense. Now, I would have thought for you in 1931 to say, I'm of the anointed, I would have thought you'd have to be a mature person, let's say about 20. So that means you'd have to be actually born in 1910. Which means that these days, what would that make you? 113 or whatever? Not many people of those alive today. So, let's think about this. Let's be generous, and let's just say if the figure was finished in 1931, if the calling was 1931, let's just say that somehow Jehovah's Spirit worked upon you in the womb, and when you were 1 year of age, you already were anointed. That would still mean if you were born in 1931, that nowadays you'd have to be what 70, 92. How many of the governing body, this new, the older ones, how many of those are in the 90s? I don't think any of them in the 90s. I think they're all in the 70s and 80s, and let's not even start down the ones who are in the 50s. That's just taking the piss, to be honest with you. So in other words, it means that none of the current governing body members can possibly be of the 144,000. I think the figure was reached, if we're going by that figure according to me was reached in AD 200 and surpassed. According to Russell, it was reached in, 1881. And according to Rutherford, the cutoff was 1931. Now this is important because we can say, oh well, that was Russell, that was years ago. That's what the witnesses, that was years ago. Well, here we go, boys and girls, because there was a question from readers in 1996, not that long ago. Most of us can remember the 90s. 1996, I've been married 10 years at this point in 1996. So most of us were knocking around 1996, and this is questions from readers from a Watchtower, 1996, August the 15th, page 31. There's somebody who written in to the Watchtower because they were a little bit concerned that the numbers had slightly increased of the memorial partakers, and that was sort of messing with their head a bit. Is it ironic? Wow, if that messed with their head in 1996, if they were looking at the figures that I'm looking at now, where now there's 21,000 memorial partakers compared to the 8,000 in the year 2000, that would blow their head off. It'd blow their head off. We're not looking like a small percentage increase, we're looking like ×2. But anyway, I want to read some of this, not all of this. This is important. The reports for some years show that the number partaking of the memorial emblems increased slightly. Does this suggest that many new ones are being anointed with the Holy Spirit? Then they go to, it starts off, there is good reason to believe that the number of 144,000 anointed Christians was, I've highlighted for you, was completed decades ago. So agreeing with what Rutherford said, that it was complete decades ago. This is 1996, not that long ago. So it goes on to say, we understand, it says here, this is important bit, it says, those who truly, I'm going to highlight this, because this is coming back to what I'm on and on. It says, those who truly have this spirit anointing know it with certainty. It is not a mere wish or a reflection of an emotional and unrealistic view of themselves. Do you see that bit there? It's that bit there. I've just highlighted it there. Now, that's important because people who have an emotional and unrealistic view of themselves, it is some sort of form of mental illness, because all of a sudden you've got some sort of delusions that you are something when you're not. And that because you've said that you are that thing, you would then expect people to not only believe you, but believe anything you say because your viewpoint is so special. You know, as though the God was speaking from your mouthpiece. And so you should really listen to what you say and do as what they do. So any sort of peculiarities that you have and things you don't like, well, it's actually God saying this, not me. Because they have, I'll say it again, they have an emotional and unrealistic view of themselves. That is the society, summing up people who believe they are the anointed but clearly aren't. So basically, I think obviously all of the current governing body, including the next overlapping generation who boldly go where no Bible teachings have gone before, that is them. It goes on to say, which is even more, I said the figure was reached in AD 200. It goes on to say, we understand that this heavenly calling continued down through the centuries, during the so-called Dark Ages. There may have been times when the number of anointed ones were very few. But with the re-establishment of true Christianity near the end of the last century, more were called and chosen. Now, think about what it's referring to is, imagine, especially these people, when you go through the history of Christianity, there are martyrs galore. These people were sent out to convert literally whole empires and countries that just literally go on a bit of land and say, I'm here to teach you a brand new religion. And a lot of them weren't very welcome. And a lot of them ended up dying. And that's why there's martyrs galore. There's martyrs galore for these ones. And their belief in the teaching of Christ and their heavenly hope was that strong that they were willing to die for their beliefs. And they would, you know, the new Christian teaching wasn't like by, for instance, the Vikings at first. In fact, when the Vikings were coming over to Britain, they were actually attacking Lindisfarne, the Abbey and Lindisfarne there, because they didn't, you know, they didn't they didn't agree with Christianity. And you know, for anybody to come out to go over there and to be converted by Christian, you really were again putting your life on the line. So clearly during this time, you would have thought there were ones that were worthy of going upstairs. But again, like I've said, I believe that figure was actually reached in the year 200 at least. Then it goes on to say that it says, and I'll highlight it again, but it seems that in the mid-1930s, the full number of the 144,000 was basically completed. So that is that there. Be quiet. Okay, This is 1996. So basically, 1996, the Watchtower is already stating that if you were not already a memorial partaker in 1930, that you cannot be a governing body member because clearly if you do, you have an emotional and unrealistic view of themselves, which again would totally mean that all the governing body at the moment cannot be of the 144,000 of the anointed class because they're too young. Then it goes on to say, thus there began, because remember in the 1930s, that's when all of a sudden, this is so bizarre, that this secondary class was, which nobody noticed. Nobody noticed in the 4,000 years since people had versions of the old scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, and then the 2,000 since the Greek scriptures. Nobody in that time had spotted that the hope that was repeated again and again and again through the Hebrew scriptures and through to the Greek scriptures was an earthly hope. That was not spotted until 1930s. Isn't it bizarre? Isn't it bizarre that this book, which is supposed to be the guiding force, giving the hope for billions of people, there's so little reference to the paradise that it was only spotted in the 1930s that, hey ho, I think there's another group here. It had nothing to do with the fact that the witnesses incoming was getting bigger and bigger, and thinking, you know what, I think we've surpassed that 144,000. Who are all these extra dudes? So they had to go back and go, who could these extra dudes be? Oh, there's another class. There's an earthly class. Oh, these classes are going to, these clearly other guys are going to inherit the earth. Well, we're going to inherit the heavens, and we'll just rule over these guys. So we need to go out and do even more witnessing to bring in this other flock. What a load of bollocks. You know, if this teaching of the paradise earth was the main hope for billions of people going back to the dawn of time, why isn't that reiterated in the Bible so strongly that there'd be no doubt that for you to all someone come out and say, I'm going to heaven, would be like, really? Really? You know, how strange, how strange. Because you know the Bible doesn't really teach that. It just references a little bit. It's the other way around. You know, for people today come out and say, oh, by the way, my hope is I'm going to live forever in a paradise earth, most people in this will go, really? Really? You know, that the Bible really speaks about a heavenly hope. I know that, but there's a few things which give that idea. Wowee! So anyway, it goes on to say, the facts over the decades reflect both the completion of the calling of the anointed and Jehovah's blessing on the growing great crowd who hope to survive the Great Tribulation. For example, the memorial celebration 1935 attended by 63,000, those partaking were 52,000. 30 years later, in 65, attendance was nearly 2 million. Memorial partakers had significantly reduced to 11,000. Moving 30 years later, 1995, the memorial attendance is 13 million, while only 8,645 partook. Clearly, as the decades passed, the number of those professing to be the remnant greatly decreased. 52,035, 11,565, 8,695. However, those with earthly hopes have been blessed and their number has increased abundantly. Yes, and so has in the witnesses with it isn't the decreasing memorial attendance, it's the increasing. Their increase is vast compared to the ones who belong to this other crowd. It says the most recent published reports for the year 1995, and it shows 28 more partakers than in the preceding year, though the ratio of partakers to those attending did actually drop. On balance, that a few more chose to partake of the emblems is no cause for concern. Over the years, some, even once newly baptized, have suddenly began to partake. In a number of cases, after a while, they acknowledged that this was an error. Some have recognised that they partook as an emotional response to perhaps physical or mental strain. Let's highlight that line. Down at the bottom. Read that, boys and girls. Can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? So, this is 1996. They're saying that there are some who started to become memorial partakers because the figure's now been set by this article in 1931 or 35. Some have recognised that they partook as an emotional response to perhaps physical or mental strain, which is what I said at the beginning of this, that I believe that all the current governing body members are mentally ill, because anybody saying that they are of the remnant today cannot be, because they're too young. How is it that all of a sudden the society think it's acceptable this current mob believe they are memorial partakers of 144,000, and then get these other guys in who are in their 50s? Maybe that's the problem that Morris has got. Maybe he's thinking, this can't be. You know, maybe he went back and read that maybe went back and realised and read that went, shit, we're talking utter shit. There's no way they can be memorial partakers. In fact, I doubt I can be as well. It says, but they came to see that they were really not called to heavenly life. They asked for God's merciful understanding, and they continued to serve him as fine, loyal Christians, having the hope of everlasting life on earth. And it says, it goes on to say, it says, there is every reason, I'll highlight this as well, there is every reason to believe that the number of anointed ones will continue to decline as advanced age and unforeseen occurrence in their earthly lives. There we go. This is 1996. 1996. There we go. 1996. But incredibly, the figures have gone up, and incredibly, they've not just gone up, but the age has gone down for the memorial partakers, so much so that even the organisation that came out with this statement in 1996, which is just verifying what Rutherford said in the 30s, shows that in fact, you know, they are now buying into their own bullshit. They are now going beyond the things that even they have written. Not only are they going beyond the things that the Bible's written, they're now going beyond the things that even they have written. So this is why I believe this current lot cannot be of the 144,000. I believe that figure was reached in the year 200, but if we're to bang in the witnessy bullshit that still there was still another ones required in the early couple of 100 years, I'm not buying this either. I think at the end of the day is the current mob cannot be 145,000. They're all mentally ill, and for anybody who really relishes the opportunity to go on and kill billions of people at Armageddon just for being a part of the wrong religion, if you are buying into that, if you believe that you are one of those, it even enforces the point that the governing body, all of them, are mentally ill. Anyway, shall leave that with you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm to go off and wait for it, yes, some more painting. Should be finished by the end of the week. Get in. Right, anyway, I'm off. See you later. Bye-bye. Oh, and United are playing today, so up the Reds. Bye-bye.